Whiteness was created as a control tool to control white people. But for the people being controlled, it became a belief system of how they should approach the world. But whiteness is a lie. Hi everyone, this is going to be my first video. I've never done anything like this before, so I'm hoping that I'm able to stay on the subject until the end of this video, as I often never do. I tend to drift from subject to subject, so fingers crossed. With the recent event of the murder of George Floyd, I felt that I needed to put a video up on YouTube. So I'm going to be talking about racism today. But in order for me to do that successfully, I'm going to have to talk about whiteness. This is because I often find it very difficult to talk about racism without talking about whiteness. For me, it's like going around in circles, talking about the branches and not the root of the problem. Your whiteness itself is the very root of this madness, which is what I call it. Right from the moment that I stepped my foot into Europe, racism is something that I've had to deal with. So have other black people and non-white people. Racism is something that I've always wanted to understand what this thing is. And this has led me into learning and educating myself about racism, about European history, about African history. So I've been reading a lot of books, listening to professors, historians, sociologists. Racism is very complex. It's not something that I can have a small conversation about, because one minute you're looking at it from a particular subject, before you realize it takes you into a lot of other things. Racism is very deep. Which is why, oftentimes when I've been at an event, or when I've spoken to black people and non-white people about racism, I always find it very difficult to have this conversation. And the reason for this is because we tend to talk about racism from our experiences alone. And for me, that story is not complete. There is a huge part of that story that is missing. And that is the story of the people that are perpetrating this. And that is the story of what was done to white people, which is whiteness. Until we start having that conversation along with our experiences, I do not think that we're going to be able to eliminate racism. Whiteness is a topic I'm going to be talking about today. I'm not talking about white people. I'm talking about the ideology of whiteness. Whiteness was an ideology that was created by the so-called European elite, used as a means to control poor Europeans in imperial culture so that they can be exploited. Let me say that again. Whiteness is an ideology that was created by the so-called European elite, used as a means to control poor Europeans in imperial culture so that they can be exploited. And this has been manipulated into so many things in order to force them to accept their own disenfranchisement. This madness first started in Eastern Europe with some European philosophers, but has been transported all over the world. And every other country that has ascribed to this madness also did it for the exploitation of their own people. The day the European people decided to be white, the day that they decided to be something else other than human beings, the rest of us are be suffering from the consequences. From the consequences of what was done to them. Whiteness was done to all of us. But today, I'm going to be talking about European people. What was done to them? As the European empires grew, they realized that they needed to control more people. They needed more soldiers. In order for them to get more soldiers, they realized that they needed to convince poor Europeans that exploitation of other people was acceptable. But in order for them to achieve that, they also realized that they needed to convince them that they were white. The Spanish people didn't want to be white. The Irish people were exploited by the British Empire. They were never considered white. But you see, the only people that can truly be white is rich white men. They were just sold a vision. They were sold a tale. They were told that they were part of the empire. They convinced the European poor people that they, together with European elite, are going to go all over the world and conquer. But you see, before the European elite started looting from the rest of the world, they had already successfully looted and dominated their own people, bullied them with the wealth that they stole from them. So the fear of power was already there. So convincing them that they were part of this thing, this empire, it was easy because they wanted to be like their elite. One of the means they used in convincing them was by telling them that the people that they were going to loot, that they were barbaric people, that they didn't know what to do with their own wealth, and that they, the European rich white men, together with European poor people, were going to go all over the world and loot the wealth of these people, bring it to their country to use it to build something for themselves properly. Because they, the European rich white men, the superior being, knew better what to do with the wealth of the people that they looted. The European poor people bought into this foolishness. They followed their elite to commit all the atrocities. But when the European elite came back, guess what? They didn't share. They kept the weight. They built a lot of schools and churches. But those schools were only for the children of the looters and not for the ordinary Europeans. They did give them a little bit though. They gave them the circus show. They gave them animals from foreign places. They gave them enslaved people to stare at. But no money, not a better life, no actual wealth, no actual power. When you look at the European economy today, you begin to see what I'm talking about. When you dig deep, when you do your research carefully, you begin to see all the inequality which is entrenched. I'm going to be doing another video about this. I'm going to be doing a video about European economy, especially about the UK. I'm going to be doing a video about the UK economy. You will see where only 5% of the people controls the economy. You have the 1%, then you have the 9% who want to be like the 1%. You have the middle class who want to be like the 9%. Then you have the fake middle class who want to be like the middle class. You have the working class who want to be like the fake middle class. Then you have the fake working class who want to be like the working class. Then you have the poor people. Then you have the very poor people, just like the rest of us. So forget about all the marketing. Forget about all the things that you see on your TV too. We are all being played. We are all being monitorized too. But that is a story for another day. Back to whiteness. Whiteness was created as a control tool to control white people. But for the people being controlled, it became a belief system of how they should approach the world. But whiteness is a lie. Because whiteness is meaningless unless it is actively oppressing someone. Whiteness is a control tool. Whiteness says oppression of others is acceptable. Whiteness says domination and bullying of others is acceptable. But whiteness is not self-consistent. It needs reinforcement. This is because for the people trying to be white, not only do they think they are better than you, they also think you agree. They believe that you think you are less than them all the time, which makes no sense. It's a delusion. Because the only way that someone will constantly act subservient and unsure of themselves is when they are being constantly threatened, is when they are being bullied, oppressed, and dominated. So whiteness has no meaning unless someone is being actively oppressed, being bullied, and dominated. So the behavior that you see and experience, the behavior that you see in your workplace, in the office, when you're going shopping, when they're flinging things at you unnecessarily, when they are being condescending for no apparent reason, when they are being nasty, the bullying behavior that you experience at work, the microaggressions, when they pretend to be your friend, only for them to start playing the status game, the one-up machine game, the dominating game. This is all this nasty behavior that you experience for white people. This is white people reinforcing whiteness. When they see you going about your day-to-day life just like them, it reminds them that they are equal to you. They then defend the delusion to tell themselves that they are still white by attacking you. But there are consequences for the people trying to be white. They are actively trying to reinforce the delusions in their head, but this is constantly being met with reality. Continually trying to have their expectation met but failing will cause neurosis. They are putting themselves in a constant battle with reality that they cannot win. And this will put them in a really messed up state. So what you see in their behavior is a neurotic attempt to reinforce whiteness in the face of their reality of not being white. They are trying and failing to handle this all the time. Constantly reinforcing the delusion is a battle they can never win. The hardcore white supremacists, though, don't have these neuroses. They are psychologically stable, healthy. They are who want to hurt people. They are glad of the opportunity and will happily cause pain because it gives them joy. They know exactly what they are doing. They know they want to be white, but recognize it won't just happen. They must work at it. They know they must bully, oppress, and terrorize to achieve whiteness. For them, there is no internal conflict. They know that it is only by bullying, oppression, and hurting people that they can get to be white. But for others who say to themselves, we are not bad people, they still want to be white. They don't want to admit that it will take bullying and oppression to be white. This doesn't work. It cannot work. You cannot be white and be a good person. You can be English, German, Icelandic, but when you add the word white, you cannot be a good person because of what is required. I prefer Russian people that I have met who don't lie to themselves that it will take being nasty to black people to be white. And some of them are fine with doing that. And at least with them, you know what you're dealing with. English and other British white people lie to themselves and make it all much more difficult. And this makes them look ridiculous. If the whiteness of these people were real, they would not be spending so much time and effort looking for it. They believe their whiteness is real. They have been told that this is who they are. Binding whiteness not only to their self-esteem, but their self-worth, their very self-identity. And their neurotic, aggressive, psychological confusion when reality slaps them in the face is pitiful. But let me get into describing some examples now. Practical consequences for white people trying to be white, and the foolish behavior that we see too much of. But before that, I think I need to be clear, precise about what I mean when I use the word racism. I am not using the literal meaning of the practice of being racist to discriminate positively or negatively on the basis of race. What I mean is the belief, the excuse that prejudice is acceptable, that it is reasonable to say to yourself that the belief these particular people over there are intrinsically inferior to me is reasonable, that it is legitimate. That's what I mean when I say racism. If I switch between meanings, this makes all my arguments meaningless. So, when I use the word racism in this video, please understand that it is a shorthand for believing that one group of humans with a particular range of skin tones is inferior to another skin tone group, and then acting on that belief. Some white people have tried to say that this behavior that I have experienced isn't racism, it's classism. My refutation of that is that I have experienced classist reactions. People reacting in a classist way will either cringe and be subservient, or react with jealousy towards people who appear wealthier than them, or be supercilious and casually denigrating towards people who appear poorer than them. Either behavior is not helpful And I have experienced both sides, from both black people and white people here in the UK and in African countries. But this is different from the behavior where someone is not only jealous, but also tries to assert themselves as not just equal to you, but superior. Or when someone believes themselves to be wealthier and more successful with no visible evidence. And when you then don't cringe and be subservient, they then respond with active attacks in an attempt to make you behave subserviently. This is both racism and classism working together. A belief in your inferiority, a judgmental comparison of their relative wealth. And this judgment is really directed towards themselves. They judge themselves as less, believe the lie of their intrinsic superiority, and then try to resist this contradiction to protect their fragile self-esteem. A self-esteem that is only fragile when they are specifically challenged over their delusionary assumption that they are intrinsically worth more than black people.